In the heart of Egypt's delta, in a small village called Al-Bahu Farik, lived a young man named Khaled Hassan. Khaled was 28 years old, thin and simple in appearance, yet his eyes carried a deep sadness that no one could ignore. He was a graduate of the Faculty of Commerce, but he never found a special job. His life was quiet, almost dull, spent between the small house he shared with his old grandfather, Uncle Abda, and the narrow streets and fields of the village. Khaled never asked much from life. His only dream was to marry Mona. Mona was the daughter of one of the village's richest and most respected men. A gentle, graceful girl who knew of Khaled's love for her for many years. But she could not stand against her father's strict will. Khaled proposed to her 8 times, and every time he heard the same harsh words. Mona's father, angrily, "You are an ordinary young man. You have neither wealth nor status. What makes you worthy of my daughter?" Khaled, in a broken voice, "I only have a heart that loves her, and I promise I will make her happy." Mona's father, mocking, "A heart is not enough, Khaled. Go and find something that makes you different. Only then will I consider it." The last time was the hardest of all. Not only did Mona's father reject him, but he also humiliated him publicly before the people of the village, shouting, "If you want to be a hero, go and fight in Iraq. But here, you are worthless." Khaled left their house feeling as if the ground had collapsed beneath his feet. He returned home, his steps heavy. Inside, his grandfather sat on an old mat, reading from a small Quran. The old man looked up, saw the sadness on his grandson's face, sighed, and said, "Grandfather, they refused you again, Khaled?" Khaled refused and humiliated me, Grandpa. He said, "I am worthless." Grandfather, kindly, "You are not worthless. Maybe people have not seen what's inside you yet, but I know you are different." Khaled, bitterly, "And how can I prove that to them?" "I am tired, Grandpa, so tired." The old man fell silent for a moment, then spoke in a low, secretive voice. "Have you ever heard of the tunnel beneath our village, Khaled?" Khaled lifted his head in surprise. "The tunnel? What tunnel?" His grandfather smiled mysteriously and said, "It is an ancient passage, dug long ago. People say it is haunted by jinn. But when I was young, I entered it once with my friends. We walked a long way through a dark, narrow corridor until we reached a strange path. It did not look like anything from this earth. We grew afraid and returned, but I never forgot what I saw." Silence filled the room. In Khaled's heart, a strange spark was lit. Curiosity, fear, and a small glimmer of hope. Could this tunnel lead him to something different? A treasure, an adventure that might change his life forever. That night, Khaled could not sleep. He tossed and turned on his bed, hearing the echo of Mona's father's cruel words and his grandfather's story about the tunnel. At last, he whispered to himself, "If madness is the answer, then let it be. I will enter the tunnel, even if it is the end of me." At the first light of dawn, Khaled had already made his decision. He carried an old lantern and a bottle of water and stood before the entrance of the tunnel. The air that drifted from its opening was cold and damp, as if it came from another world. He hesitated for a moment, his heart pounding violently, then whispered to himself, "I am tired of living like an ordinary man. I have nothing to lose if I try." Step by step, he descended the stone stairs of the tunnel. Darkness surrounded him on every side, and the heavy smell of moisture filled his lungs. The deeper he went, the more he heard strange echoes, faint whispers, or the sound of footsteps against the stone walls. More than once, Khaled thought of turning back, but the memory of people's scorn, and Mona's father's rejection pushed him forward. He walked for what felt like an eternity, until the ground beneath his feet changed, no longer familiar. Suddenly, the narrow passage opened into a vast space, and before he realized it, Khaled found himself standing in the middle of an endless desert. He lifted his head in astonishment. He was no longer in his world. Far away on the horizon, he saw a great city. Its walls were towering, its towers built in strange, unfamiliar designs, as though they belonged to another age. The morning sun shone upon its stone walls, giving it both majesty and mystery. Cautiously, Khaled walked closer, until he reached its massive gates. There stood guards, dressed in clothes unlike anything he had ever seen. They looked at him with suspicion and asked in a strange language, yet somehow he was able to understand them. "Guard, who are you, and from which land do you come?" Khaled, confused, stammered, "My name is Khaled. I came from Egypt." The guards exchanged puzzled glances. Then one of them said, "You are a stranger to the land of Zykola." Khaled entered the city, and everything around him seemed different. The markets were crowded with people, yet there was no money being exchanged. Instead, he heard them speaking of something called units of intelligence. Curious, Khaled approached a vendor and asked, "How much does this cost?" The man replied, "It costs 5 units of your intelligence." Khaled stood frozen, his mind blank. What did it mean to buy something with intelligence? Just then, a young man with a kind face approached him and asked, "You're not from Zykola, are you?" Khaled shook his head. "No, I am a stranger." The young man smiled and said, "Then allow me to explain. My name is Yaman." Khaled sat with Yaman in a quiet alley, where the shocking truth was revealed. Yaman explained that in Zykola, money did not exist. The only currency here was intelligence. Every person had an account, recorded by the ruler of the city. When someone worked or created something new, his balance increased. When he bought goods or paid for services, units of intelligence were deducted. But when a person's balance reached 0, his fate was death. On the dreadful day of Zykola, the weakest were executed so that the strong could continue to grow stronger. Khaled's eyes widened in horror, his voice trembling as he asked, "How can a person's worth be measured only by his intelligence? And how can the weak survive?" Yaman sighed with sorrow.